Hello students, welcome to the lecture on oral communication. And after the lecture, we will be able to learn the following objectives. Define the principle of effective oral communication. Understand media of oral communication. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of oral communication. Explain the styles of oral communication. Understand the meaning and purpose of interviews. Let us start with the concept of oral communication. Often believed to be much older than the written form, oral communication, which is still the more preferred medium. We speak a lot more than we write. Compare the number of phone calls which one makes with the number of letters one writes. The better part of our days is usually spent in oral exchanges, in conversation, enabling us to interact socially with the people around us. Oral communication, also known as verbal communication, is the interchange of verbal messages between the sender and the receiver. It is more immediate than written communication. It is also more natural and informal. In human development, speech precedes writing. We first learn to speak and then, much later, develop the ability to write and read. The ability to speak, articulate single words and later on speak groups of words in meaningful sequence comes to us in due course of growth as a child. We develop this ability from listening to verbal sounds, words. As compared to written communication, therefore, our ability to communicate through the spoken words is an ability naturally developed in us, provided we are not deaf or dumb. In human interaction, oral communication is used more, perhaps overused at times, than written communication. Out of the total time spent communicating, normally 45% relates to listening, 30% to speaking, 16% to reading, and 9% to writing. Thus, 75% of our time we spend in listening and speaking. It is therefore necessary that people in business learn to use this time to their best advantage for creating and sustaining good relationship through their ability to listen and speak effectively. Let us discuss the principles of effective oral communication. In business transactions that involve face-to-face interaction between individuals or groups of individuals, it is not enough to be able to talk, speak, discuss, converse, argue, or negotiate an issue. A manager should be able to converse or discuss persuasively or effectively and convincingly. But to do so, he must know the skills of oral communication. A manager often faces difficulties in attempting to resolve problems of workers and in trying to influence others through dialogue and personal discussions. He or she needs oral communication skills that include abilities to help problem solving, to resolve conflict, to influence people to work together, to persuade others to be involved in organizational goals, to be assertive without being aggressive, to develop listening skills, to be an effective negotiator, to make proposals. These skills will develop the necessary tact to work effectively for mutual satisfaction in the given situations. Broadly speaking, one has to know when to talk and when not to talk but listen. How to talk, that is the tone, pitch and modulation. To be able to interpret the listener's facial expressions, physical gestures and movements, attitudes together with the knowledge of his own body talk, which consciously or unconsciously flows out to the listeners. Objective of oral communication in business. It is known that a manager's maximum time is devoted to oral communication. He is engaged in one of the following tasks: meetings, discussions, negotiations, seminars, presentations, interviews, peer conversation, subordinate instructions, and telephonic conversation. All these business activities, except telephoning, involve face-to-face verbal communication. A telephone conversation is a one-to-one oral communication that requires skillful control of tones, voice, pitch, and precise use of words. Now let us talk about the media of oral communication. The news media can be used strongly in alerting and informing the public. It is important to establish credible and productive working relationships with representatives of the media. In most instances, the media will be cooperative in publishing important planning, response, and recovery information. Someone is in a position to assist them in understanding the important public service role they play. There are two likely forums in which one will use the oral communication skills. Interviews, press conferences. In both circumstances, the primary audience is the public, with the media serving as a conduit for the information. Be sure that the informational messages that someone provides to the media are spoken as though one is directly addressing his audiences. In the worst case, the media may report the message erroneously, report accurate information in an incorrect context, focus public attention on one or the operations instead of the message. To minimize misunderstandings, build strong relationship with the media representatives. Work actively to keep the media informed. Keep up-to-date contact list for media representative. Be aware of media deadlines. Respond to media inquiries promptly. Be respectful and tactful, even if someone is asked to question that make interviewee uncomfortable. Be honest about what one knows. Acknowledge what one does not know and offer to seek answers. Building relationships with the media will help them help one and the public in an emergency. Benefits. Oral media offer opportunities to reach a small audience quickly and inexpensively. Gain instant feedback on whether the message is getting through. Change the strategy midstream if the audience raises unexpected points. Convey enthusiasm or other emotions that cannot or should not be conveyed on paper. Build on personal relationships that are so important to our day-to-day work. Options. As with written media, oral media offer many options. They include phone call, hallway discussion, meeting over lunch, office meeting, conference presentation, teleconference, video disc, video conference, radio or TV broadcast, media interview. Let us now study the advantages and disadvantages of oral communication. Advantages of oral communication. This type of communication has certain advantages over written communication, which may be enumerated as follows. It is spontaneous and therefore can transfer the message immediately. It has greater speed since it needs to be decoded almost as soon as the encoding has occurred. There is a quality of instantaneous in an exchange of oral message between the sender and the receiver. Since the receiver has to be necessarily present, the feedback or need for clarification can be met easily and quickly. As a matter of fact, oral communication has greater number of cycles in a communicative event as message and their feedback flow back and forth between sender and receiver. It is less formal and therefore helps in bypassing and rigidities of organizational hierarchies. However, there could be several drawbacks. It has the distinct advantage of being quick and prompt. It provides the opportunity to both the transmitter and the receiver of the message to respond directly. Oral communication facilitates close contacts and thus promotes mutual exchange of thoughts, information, understanding, and support. Oral communication through direct contact undeniably inculcates a sense of self-importance in the subordinates, which successively acts as an inspiring element. It also helps in bringing a responsive and supported morale among employees of an organization. Oral communication further allows the superior to make a rapid evaluation of subordinates' actions as well as reactions to any message transmitted. This obviously assists the superior to diminish and prevent differences and revamp plans and policies according to the need of the time and conditions. Now, disadvantages of oral communication. There are also some disadvantages of oral communication that can be discussed in the following points. Since oral communication is ephemeral, that is, it is said and heard in that instant and then disappears forever, it cannot be documented for future use. Hurried planning may lead to confused or logically inconsistent messages. Oral messages are to a great extent dependent on listening and attentiveness on the part of the receiver. If the receiver has been lacking in these areas, the message is lost. Memory plays an important role in retention of heard messages. Forgetting can be a great obstacle for oral communication. This problem is often enhanced when the oral messages are too long. One of the biggest disadvantages of this medium is that it has no legal validity. In the absence of records, the law does not entertain oral messages as admissible legal evidence. A manager's choice between oral and written communication is guided by considering the suitability of oral or written form for the purpose and nature of the subject of communication.
Hello and welcome to 8 Essential Elements of Oral versus Written Communication. Here's where we're going. Explain the 8 essential elements of communication. Explain how written communication is similar to oral communication and how it is different. First consideration, the source. A source creates and communicates a message. For example, Jay makes a telephone call to Heather, or Jay writes an email to Heather. In both cases, Jay is the source. Receiver. A receiver receives the message from the source. In our example, Heather would listen to Jay, and Heather reads Jay's email in the other context. Message. The message is the stimulus or meaning produced by the source for the receiver. So when Jay asks Heather to participate in a conference call at 3:15, that's an example of the message. In our other example, Jay's email asks Heather to participate in a conference call at 3:15. In both cases, the message is to participate in a conference call at 3:15. Channel. A channel is the way a message travels between source and receiver. In our first example, the channel is the telephone. In our second example, the channel is email. Feedback. Feedback is the message the receiver sends in response to the source. In this particular example, if Heather were to say yes, that would be feedback over the telephone. In the other context, Heather would reply with an email saying yes. Environment. The environment is the physical atmosphere in which the communication occurs. For example, Heather is traveling by train on a business trip when she receives Jay's phone call. Or Heather is at her desk when she receives Jay's email. The environment can have an impact on the meaning of the message. Context. The context involves the psychological expectations of the source and the receiver. Heather expects Jay to send an email with the call-in information for the call. Jay expects to do so and does. In our second example, Heather expects Jay to dial and connect the call. Jay expects Heather to check her email for the call-in information so that she can join the call. Interference. Also known as noise, interference is anything that blocks or distorts the communication process. In our first example, Heather calls in at 3:15, but she has missed the call because she forgot that she is in a different time zone from Jay. In the second example, Heather waits for a phone call from Jay at 3:15, but he does not call. Noise can have an impact on the meaning of the message. This is a diagram used for patients who can't speak. There are verbal and nonverbal dimensions to communication. Verbal communication involves the words you say. Nonverbal communication involves how you say them. For example, the tone of your voice, your facial expression, or your body language. So what are some key differences between oral and written communication? Written communication is far more formal, whereas oral communication is more conversational. Written communication is asynchronous, whereas oral communication has the expectation of immediate feedback. We're expected to speak near the 8th grade level and write much higher than that grade level. A recent nonpartisan study of Congress revealed that they had dropped an entire grade level in their speaking. You could argue this is a good or bad thing, regardless of your partisanship. Most media is designed for the 8th grade level. Remember, when speaking, to think small. Think in words and phrases. Whenever you're writing, you tend to think in paragraphs instead of words or phrases. And whether you're speaking or you're writing, remember, everything is contextual. The situation is very important. It's important to speak in short, simple sentences. And in a business context, your goal is clear, direct communication.
Moving on further, let us study the styles of oral communications. Principles of successful oral communication. Oral communication is indispensable in any group or business activity. The purpose of effective talking is to be heard and understood by the listeners. Communication should first of all have the rhythm and tone of a living voice. To achieve this quality, we should use the language that is free from long winding sentences, cliches, old-fashioned words and phrases. The pitch of the voice should take into consideration the distance between the listener and us. The tone should be marked by the accent of sincerity and confidence. The listener, unlike the reader of a written communication, has the advantage of watching interviewee in the act of verbalizing ideas and feelings and is able to note the unconscious body language which may contradict the intent of the spoken words and is constantly affected by the tone of endearment, hostility, superiority, conceit, sincerity or insincerity. The nature of the spoken word. Unlike the printed word of the written message, the spoken word in the oral communication is ephemeral, short-lived. The listener cannot turn back to the spoken words as the reader can in case he misses its meaning while reading it. This is an inherent limitation of speech. To overcome this limitation, the listener has to listen closely and attentively. And the speaker should converse slowly with the proper semantic pauses to enable the listener receive and register in his mind whatever is heard. What is fluency? Fluency usually means ease as a condition of speaking. But a fluent speaker is one who is heard with ease. The listener does not have to strain his mind to receive, register, and interpret the message heard. Listening is activated and helped when the speaker delivers his words as if they are moving in an ordered procession. Each word is distinctly heard and easily connected with the other words to form the verbal structure of the message. Characteristics of an effective oral communication. According to Francis J. Bergen, oral communication is characterized by 7 C's. These are candidness, clarity, completeness, conciseness, concreteness, correctness, courtesy. These act as principles for choosing the form, style, and content matter of oral communication. Barriers to effective oral communication. Managers have to communicate individually with people at different levels, superiors, subordinates, peers, customers, and public figures. The oral mode of communication is easy, time-saving, and functionally helpful in resolving issues. But oral communication demands great control and communicative completeness to be successful. The foremost barrier to oral communication is poor listening. Listening is a psychological act affected by several, such as status, halo effect, complexes, closed and all-knowing mind, poor retention, premature evaluation and hurried conclusions as distortions, abstracting, slant, cognitive dissonance, language barrier status. In organizations, there are formal and informal status level that affect the effectiveness of face-to-face oral communication. A subordinate would generally listen more and speak less while interacting with his or her superiors. The exchange of ideas is blocked by diffidence in the subordinate because of superior position of the speaker, that is boss. The upward oral communication is not very frequent in organizations. The fear of superior status prevents free upward flow of information. It conditions free and fair exchange of ideas. Halo effect. The awe in which a speaker is held by the listeners conditions the act of true listening. If the speaker is greatly trusted and held in the high esteem as an honest person, his statements are readily taken as true. Oral communication is thus conditioned by the impressions of the listeners about the moral eminence of the speaker. The impressions of the listener and not the intrinsic worth of the message determine the validity of communication. Complexes, a lack of confidence or a sense of superiority may prevent proper oral interaction between persons differently positioned. Sometimes one suffers from a sense of being inferior and therefore fails to take the initiative or involve him or her in the conversation, dialogue, or any other form of oral communications. Similarly, some persons consider themselves too big to condescend to talk with others. Often these are misplaced notions of self-worth and they block oral communication. Did you know? Research has established that an individual speaks nearly 125 words a minute and the brain to the listener processes nearly 4 to 5 times more rapidly. Closed and all-knowing mind listening to a large extent depends on one's curiosity to know things. Some persons believe that they know everything in a field or a subject. Their minds refuse to perceive things from other sources. Besides, some persons' business or other work areas feel too satisfied with their ways doing things to change or even discuss new ideas. The closed state of mind acts as a barrier to oral communication, which demands a readiness and willingness on the part of the listener to enter into a dialogue. Premature and evaluation and hurried conclusion as distortion. To listen patiently until the speaker completes his or her argument is necessary for correct interpretation of an oral message. The listener often distorts the real or intended meaning of communication by either prejudging the intentions of the speaker or inferring the final purpose and meaning of the message or giving a different twist to the argument according to his or her assumption, or just picking out a few shreds of information, perhaps from his or her point of interest. These mental processes during the act of listening may at times act as a block, affecting the free and fair exchange of meaning. Abstracting. Abstracting is a mental process of evaluation of thought content in terms of relative importance of ideas in the context of the total message. This is possible only on listening to the whole message and not during the process of discussion. Conversation control. The art of conversation consists in ability to listen with the concentration and reply well. Conversation control involves skills of listening in talking in a positive and meaningful way at an appropriate time. It includes techniques of changing the direction of conversation smoothly, the ability to allow a discussion to develop along key issues in an uninterrupted way towards the desired end. Broadly speaking, conversation control helps us carry on and conclude conversation, dialogue or discussion effectively on note of satisfaction as a result of mutual understanding and agreement. Let us find out the meaning and purpose of an interview. An interview can be defined as an oral tool to test a candidate's traits for employment or admission to a premier institution of learning. Being an oral test, it calls for the skill of oral and non-verbal communication to the support of performances before a panel of experts. There are different types of interviews such as panel interview. Each type of interview requires the attention for a careful application of a particular set of communication skills.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeff and this is my friend Mike, and together we're known as the Interview Guys. Now today we're enjoying one of our favorite pastimes, enjoying a cup of coffee and talking about job interviews.
Jeff, are you sure you didn't have one cup of coffee too many? You seem a little excited.
I am excited, Mike, but not because of the coffee, because a lot of people have been asking us to share our best interview tips, so today we put together a list of our top 5 favorites. If you can master these 5 tips, you'll be well on your way to getting a job offer from your next interview. Tip number 1 is that you really need to research the company and the position carefully. It's important to know exactly what they do, who their competitors are, and any current events related to the company. Now take some time to study their website, but make sure you also know the job description inside and out.
Our second tip is that you need to practice. In other words, it's important that you prepare perfect answers to some of the most commonly asked and toughest interview questions. How do you do that? Well, hang on to the end of the video and we'll show you exactly how.
Tip number 3 is that you need to prepare a few success stories that you can reference during the interview. What is a success story? A success story is a story from your past, work or personal life that highlights an achievement and reflects one of your strengths.
Now, tip number 4 is a very important one. You always need to prepare some questions to ask the interviewer. Why? Because it shows that you're prepared, knowledgeable, and enthusiastic about the job. Not to mention the fact that it'll allow you to learn as much as possible about the company and the position you're interviewing for.
So as we said earlier, our final tip is the most important tip on this list. Tip number 5 says that you need to tailor your entire interview to the company you are interviewing with. You see, most people walk into the interview room with nowhere near enough knowledge of exactly what the company or organization is looking for. You need to find out beforehand exactly what the position calls for in an employee, as well as exactly what makes up the company's perfect candidate. Once you have this information, you can position yourself as that perfect candidate by giving tailored interview answers. As we always say, it's not about you, it's about them.
Purpose of an interview. The interview is one of the most important phases of the job search process. Resume and cover letter are simply tools to get someone to the interviewing stage. The interview is the opportunity to convince an employer that one is the right person for the job. As the interviewee, the main purpose of the interview are to communicate informing about oneself, experience and own abilities, seek further information about the position and the organization, evaluation the match between own needs and what the job offers. The main purpose of the interview for the interviewer are to gather relevant information about the candidate's interview preparation, interest in and the knowledge of the industry, the position and the organization, communication skills, oral presentation skills and the ability to interact with others, qualifications, academic, work, volunteer and the other experience, leadership potential and teamwork, demonstrated ability to work with others and to get others to work together, clear and realistic, career goals, future plans and awareness of career paths, motivation and success potential, enthusiasm for the position, demonstrated patterns of accomplishment, work ethic, acceptance of responsibility, ability to keep commitments and the attitude of the importance of work. Types of interviews. Interviews can take a variety of formats. familiarizing oneself with all of them so that one can develop realistic expectations concerning the role and responsibilities during the interview. Lunch or dinner interview. This type of interview conducted in an informal environment. Be careful about the body language and manners. Do not order liquor even if boss does. Preliminary interview. As a screening test, it should be attended with full preparation and care. It is an essential stage to be cleared for moving to final interview. Use the communication skills to express confidence and ease. Sequential interview. In this form of interview, we have report to several people at the same time. We should be very careful in behavior, speech and manner as each member is prospective boss. Skill-based interview. Such interview requires one demonstrate his skills. If one is seeking to be an actor or salesperson, interviewer can be asked to act or read a script, or salesperson demonstrate the pitch of the voice and salesperson. Persuasive oral communication. Academic interview. Academic interview is a conducted question and answers environment. Someone should be able to demonstrate the skills of attentive listening, eye contact, and clarity of ideas and depth of knowledge. Now, in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. In human interaction, oral communication is used more than written communication. It is known that a manager's maximum time is devoted to oral communications. There are two likely forums in which you will use your oral communication skills: interviews and press conference. Oral communication allows the superior to make a rapid evaluation of subordinates' actions as well as reactions to any message transmitted. An effective speaker learns to control and use his tone and body language to support the message communicated by the words.